Hello, hello, hello. What's up, y'all? It's Kiara from Charm City Buyers. It's been a minute since I've been on YouTube. I don't know what the deal is, but I could not quite get it going over here. So I'm excited for today to chat about 2023 and Baltimore real estate. Talk about what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, what you can expect for us going into 2024. But really just taking the time to wrap up what has been such a um, eventful year in Baltimore real estate. So as y'all are tuning in, say what's up in the chat. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Share with a friend that you know needs to be in the room because they need to hear this information. But we're just gonna dive right in. Like I said, 2023 was something wild, right? So really what happened, I think a lot of last year was some catch up, right? And so really thinking about how to set the right policies in Baltimore. A lot of conversation from the city and the state on how to focus on Baltimore here. Hey, Phaedra. Um, and so, really, what's different, quote unquote, on Baltimore now than what has been in the past, where we all know Baltimore real estate has been a conversation for a very, very long time. What I think is really different right now is that we have the alignment between the city and city officials and the state and government officials, the governor and his administration. So one of the big taglines is success in Baltimore is success in Maryland. And what does that mean? That means that Baltimore is high on the list of priorities for making sure that everybody's successful here, which brings funding, which means opportunities, which means policies, which means results, ideally, right? And so what we saw in 2023 was a lot of those types of things coming together once Governor Westmore came into office in like January, February. You guys will see if you go and check out some of the videos that we've done in the past on YouTube that we had Governor Moore on YouTube when he was running for governor, talking about what he wanted to do and accomplish. And so when he got in the office, he put his money where his mouth is. And having that alignment between the city and the state also means that Baltimore becomes a priority on the federal level. And again, we have this momentum, right? Hey, y'all, I see you on the chat. What's up? So, all right. So and let me be very clear, right? And the reason why I like to put everything in the context of politics is not because I love politics, it's because that's really how things get done, right? So there is the work that we can do grassroots on the ground, but there is this requirement of collaboration by everyone. Everyone got to do their part. I got to do mine. Mayor Scott got to do his. Governor Westmore got to do theirs, and everybody in between, so that we can actually make momentum. And so you'll always hear me talk about politics. You'll always hear me talk about policy. You'll always hear me talk about those things, because in a city like Baltimore, where policies and politics really created the framework that we're working in, right? When you think about Baltimore being the birthplace of redlining, when you think about disparities financially, when you think about where, the community really stands, a lot of that comes from and out of policy. And so, yes, we can do our part, but we also need everyone else to do theirs. So we always going to have context. Y'all know the vibes. Hey, y'all, what's going on? All right. So let's talk about what some of those things were in 2023. First and foremost, quick, really, really, really quick pop quiz. Out of all the vacants in Baltimore, what percentage, historically on average, does Baltimore City own? Of all of the vacant properties in Baltimore, what percentage does Baltimore City own? I want to know who are like for real Charm City Buyers folks. I know we got some next gen, #NextGen takeover in the chat. If you're part of the next gen family or our small developers program, we'll talk about what that is. Okay, I see you. All right, so about 7.6%, right? So less than, y'all really not playing. I'll take the rounded up 10. So about 7.6%, or around 7% of all the vacant properties in Baltimore are owned and controlled by the city. which means that 93% are individually or LLC owned, right? Owned by investors or owned by estates or owned by, individual people. So when we started 2023, does anyone know how many vacants we had at the beginning of 2023? Let me see, because y'all showing out with the percentages in the chat. So let's see if y'all need to be taking over the show. How many vacants were at the top of 2023? Over 13K, yes. 14K, exactly. So there was about 14,000, not about, I'm going to tell you exactly. On January 1, 2023, there are 14,359 vacant properties in Baltimore City. Now, again, remember, language is important. And this is big. Language is really important. So when they talk about there's 14 or 13,000 vacants in Baltimore, they're talking about vacant properties. Now, what's a vacant property in Baltimore? A vacant property in Baltimore is a property that has what's called a vacant building notice. A vacant building notice. So there were over 14,000 properties that had a vacant building notice in Baltimore City. So what's a vacant building notice? That is when the housing folks, they have inspectors, they go out, they send you a letter and say your house needs to be boarded up, it needs to be renovated, you have high grass, right? Put a 1 in the chat if you are in Baltimore real estate and you've gotten one of these letters from Baltimore City Housing to say your property has a vacant building notice. Right? So that is what that 14,359 vacant property number is at the top of 2023. By the end of 2023, we got below that 14,000 number for the first time in forever and a day. And we ended the year at 13,642 vacants. Y'all know if I'm coming on YouTube, we are coming with a notebook. We are getting exact, okay? She gonna make sure you know exactly what's going on. So, but remember that those are just not only just vacant properties, so it doesn't include land or things like that, but it's vacant properties that have the notice. So not all vacant houses have a vacant building notice. And that's why when we talk about Baltimore City opportunity and how many actual vacant homes there are, it's more than the number that they tend to send in the newspapers or wherever else, right? Make sure as you guys are joining in, hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you share this with a friend. Make sure folks are getting the information they need, especially starting out 2024 on the right foot. All right. So we decreased the number of properties with vacant building notices from 14,359 to 13,642. Now, sometimes people be like, all right, well, you sent out less letters. No, what we saw was we had actually, where's my number? We had 1,100 UNOs issued. So the only way you can get a vacant building notice taken off of a property is if you get what's called a use and occupancy certificate, which basically means that you did the permitted work required to get the property renovated and get it done, right? Now someone can live in it once it has the use and occupancy certificate. So 1,172 properties got a UNO in 2023, and 343 properties got demolished, right? Like we got stats, okay? We come in prepared. What's up, you guys? Hey, I see you in the chat. If y'all are in next gen, put next gen in the chat just so I can say hi and see who's all in here. I see if you guys there. And so we saw that decrease in vacants, right? So not only did you see that, but you also saw a consistent focus on how do we continue to eradicate vacants throughout the year, not only because it's better for the community, not only because it's better financially for the city, not only because it's ugly and don't nobody want to see vacants everywhere, but really because there was a flow, right, of capital to be able to get those things done in a way that we haven't seen that in the past. So some of that, hey y'all, so some of that was from COVID. So there was ARPA money. There was money that came from the state and the federal levels to fund different programs and initiatives But even more so, I think really coming into, and I know this, I'm gonna try not to get myself in trouble, right? But coming into 2024, understanding that it is a campaign year, there's going to be a lot of conversations politically about who's running for what and what's important to them and what should happen. Really, a lot of people needed some wins, right? And so focusing on vacants right now when there's money flowing is a really great opportunity. So um, some of the big things coming out of vacant building or vacant property policies and opportunities was really the final conversation came out a few weeks ago around the build initiative to eradicate vacants. So basically, there is a $3 billion strategy that was created by an organization called Build, which is basically a conglomerate of different religious, like churches and places like that come together to create policy and push things forward as a unit. They are called Build, very powerful. That organization actually helped to push and create the 21st Schools Initiative, if you guys remember that. So Build, Mayor Brandon Scott, and the Greater Baltimore Committee came together to create this $3 billion strategy to eradicate vacants. So they're doing that in a myriad of ways through private raising of capital, through bonds and things like that, to be able to get some of that money into the city so that they can get these properties in control and get the properties in the hands of investors and developers. Why do they need to do all this? Remember, because the city only owns and controls 7% of the vacant properties, those properties that have vacant building notices. The city only has control of 7% of that. And so having this $3 billion initiative is really for the city to be able to pull, or an entity, this might be like a quasi-government entity, which means it's not technically government, but it works very closely with it. This organization then can get control of those properties because they have the money, the process, and the team to do so better, faster, whatever you want to call it, than the city housing department can today, because the assumption is that they don't have the staff or the ability to be able to go after it at a high level. Be it right, be it wrong, agree or don't agree. And so that's what that's for. So that 7% can increase, and there can be a flow, right? There can be a flow of properties to go into the control of folks as this quasi-government entity, and then out to investors and developers and everyone who can actually get them done, right? Now, this is, for those of you, I saw the next gens in the chat. This is where next gen comes in. This is where the conversations about what, like, for example, our mentees in our coaching program and the folks that have learned and took the time to understand how to invest in Baltimore real estate, why that's important, when Khalil and I are in these rooms to help create these strategies with Build or whomever else, and be part of identifying not only the problem, but helping to create the solutions. And so as the city or these organizations get control of these properties, it becomes that much more important that there's informed people who actually know how to get them done, right? Not just talk about it, but be about it. And so that's where a lot of y'all next geners in the chat really come in, is as these things come full circle, none of these organizations want to hold on to the properties, but they do need to know where to get them, right? And that's been a lot of what we've done over the last quite a bit. Speaking of which, I actually really excited about this stat. In 2023, specifically, our Next Gen Accelerator, which is our group coaching program focused on investing in real estate in Baltimore. In 2023, y'all, you guys invested $5.6 million in Baltimore real estate. $5.6 million in 2023 alone. 2 out of 3 of those properties were vacant. And so, again, the reason why these conversations are important, why Next Gen is important, while tapping in is important, while being part of that community is important, and why it's important that we, as we sit at these tables, are making sure we're keeping it open for everyone else that's looking to do great work, is that we have to show that we can get it done, right? And so when we're in these rooms talking about vacant numbers and talking to the housing department or whomever else, we can also say that we've created a solution and here's how it's currently being solved today. So we are, over the last 3 years, NextGen has invested well over $30 million into Baltimore real estate. And with the interest rates changing, the market shifting, things slowing down significantly in 2023, y'all still did $5.6 million. So snaps, cheers, shout out to y'all. We did NextGen did the equivalent of well over right around, and also this is only reported because I know some of y'all done closed on stuff and didn't send it over in that form. We can talk about that later. But for what's reported, NextGen, our program alone, not my properties, y'all properties, did about 5%. 5% alone of what's reported of the vacant number, right? The eradication of vacants, the decrease in vacants in Baltimore. NextGen alone did about 5% of that. Nuts. Love it. So 2023, vacant decreasing, a focus on eradicating vacants, a focus on policy, a focus on how do we really shift the narrative when it comes to neighborhoods, communities, and housing in Baltimore. Now, a lot of that comes down to, again, right? How do we get in control of properties? So in addition to getting funding to get control of properties, it's also how do we de-incentivize people to just sit on properties, right? How do we make it hard for people to just sit on properties? Again, real quick, make sure that you guys are hitting the like button, make sure you're sharing, make sure folks know that this is happening so y'all can ask questions as we are going. So we are incentivizing folks to either sell their properties or actually do work to them. And so they did that a few ways. One, by increasing fines and things of that nature for vacant properties. So they are looking to make it hurt, right, in your pocket. So folks who are just sitting on properties and paying their couple $100s in taxes every year, they are making sure that there are fines to de-incentivize that. You will see more properties going through what's called the in rem process, which is the process created by Baltimore City Housing and Housing Commissioner Alice Kennedy, where they have a legal team focused on essentially foreclosing on vacant properties because the liens and encumbrances, whether that's water bills, tax bills, environmental fines, things of that nature, exceed the value of the property tax assessed, the assessed value of the property. So really quick, right? You have your assessed value and you have your market value of a property. Your market value is how much will someone pay for this property if I sell it. Your assessed value is how much does the city and the state, how do they calculate my property taxes? What does the city and state value my property at? That's your assessed value. So the in rem process in the housing department will foreclose on a property if the liens and things against that property exceed the assessed value of the property. So they're able to take more properties, increase that 7% number, and get more control. The other thing that I think we'll continue to see, and I know I'm kind of shifting a little bit into 2024, giving you a kind of a glimpse of that conversation, is increasing property taxes for properties that are vacant, right? So they are looking at having a different tax rate for vacant properties than they are for occupied properties. Now, there's a whole bunch to talk about in the background of that and what that means from like a micro and macroeconomic level. Hey, but that is a big conversation as well, is again, how do we increase a lot of those costs that those vacant properties have so it can even trigger the opportunity to take the property back through in rem or whatever other resources that the city has So in their toolbox to get control of property. So properties and vacants, all that stuff was a really, really big conversation. I will give you a couple. I know everyone's like, well, where? Give me a zip code. First and foremost, my regular reminder, I don't talk zip codes, I talk neighborhoods, because zip codes are way too big. Baltimore is block to block. And if you focus on a zip code versus at least a neighborhood, you finna be jacked. Somebody gonna give you a zip code, you don't think you know what you're doing, you buying that zip code, and it's not giving what it's supposed to be gave. Okay. And so a few neighborhoods, your biggest decrease in vacant building notices. So these are neighborhoods where there were a lot more use and occupancy certificates issued than vacant building notices were reissued. So you saw less vacant properties, less vacant building notices in these neighborhoods. So in East Baltimore, the neighborhood with the biggest decrease in vacant building notices was Broadway East, which is significant because you'll probably find on here somewhere a conversation a couple years ago where I said Broadway East had the highest concentration of vacant building notices in the city. And so one of those neighborhoods that have seen a pretty decent shift over the years, and a neighborhood that in the past we had done quite a bit of work in. So would like to think we had something to do with that. And in West Baltimore, the neighborhood with the biggest decrease in vacant building notices was Central Park Heights, which also isn't horribly surprising because, number one, Park Heights been slept on. I've said so many times over the years that Park Heights is a neighborhood that has a reputation, but it's a very, very big. Like, that neighborhood is huge and encompasses a lot of different things, really edging up right next to like Pikesville and Glen Oak and all these other neighborhoods. You have these big, beautiful homes that used to be like multi-families, or you can find multis, or they were multis and they were turned into single families. Sorry, they were single families, big houses, big families that were turned into multis. So sometimes you can find multis, sometimes you turn them back into single families. And then a lot of times you have these families that are moving into these homes that are really nice sizes, yards, single family detached, like just great, right? So you saw Central Park Heights having a decrease in vacant building notices, and Mayor Brandon Scott is from Park Heights. And so I think I said when he got elected that Park Heights was going to see some stuff moving forward over there. So what about Penn North? So Penn North, that neighborhood is interesting and will continue to be interesting because of the focus on transportation. So as we're thinking about eradicating vacants, right, we're also going to think about, okay, well, who's living in these areas, who's living in these neighborhoods, and where are they coming from and where they want to go, right? And so during COVID, we saw that a lot of people were moving here from DC, from New York, from Philly, from everywhere else because it was cheaper to live here. You get 3 times the house for a quarter of the price. You get better food, fight your mama, and it's like a dope city. Like, there's so much stuff that you have and can do here. And so in order to continue to target those folks or kind of keep them happy, right, is also making sure that not only can they get here and go other places easily, so can Baltimoreans, right? So can we get from Baltimore to wherever else. And so transportation system is a big conversation, was a big conversation in 2023, will continue to be one in 2024. The Penn Station, there is, I think, a $40 million project with Penn Station to be able to upgrade that station. Not only that, there's still the conversation about the bullet train getting from DC to New York in like 45 minutes or whatever it is. There is still the conversation about the red line, although there was some stuff that happened in the state office down in Annapolis when it came to budgets for transportation that honestly I was a bit surprised about, with all the excitement of the red line, to see the transportation budget shift in the opposite direction that you expected was a little bit like, what's up? But the red line being transportation from West Baltimore to East Baltimore is a really big deal. I don't know if y'all know this, but getting from one side of the city to the other takes forever. And about 40% of Baltimore City residents don't don't have access to a car. And so without a solid transportation system, folks who are living in a certain area or neighborhood are limited by the resources in that area, right? They're limited by the resources in that neighborhood. And that keeps people in this bubble. Whereas if you can allow folks or create opportunities for folks to transport themselves to better paying jobs, to, whatever, you now have the opportunity to raise the baseline in a lot of these neighborhoods by giving them access to the resources they need to do what they got to do. What does that mean? That means that people out here don't have to try to survive, but have the opportunity to thrive when they have the right resources, with which then means as an investor, as a developer, I can then do these houses, I can renovate these houses, I can get these use and occupancy certificates because the residents and folks in this neighborhood can afford that cost, right? Or we're kind of balancing out the system where even if we're doing affordable housing, we're doing it in a way that it's not a trap and kind of a shackle to stay in that situation, but a springboard to continue to grow. And so transportation is a big conversation. Employment is a big conversation. So in 2023, Baltimore City being named as a tech hub is a big deal, right? A lot of people don't know or may not know that I actually worked at a software development company in Baltimore. Was my last job before I went full-time in real estate about 7 years ago. And so, Baltimore being a tech hub is something I've been talking about for a long time because it's been a conversation for a long time. But in 2023, that became a thing that is happening. And so Baltimore becoming a tech hub, you already have healthcare being a really big anchor here. Startup culture is big. There's a lot of startup companies. There's a lot of tech companies. There's a lot of entrepreneurship here that can continue to spur job creation. And so that focus on job creation, on incentivizing businesses to be here, on creating opportunities for them to stay and be here affordably. So the co-working spaces and things like that, like you'll see if you research it, there's a lot of them. And that's because one, there's the need because there's all of these different things that are happening here. But two, it makes it economical to start and try to scale your business in Baltimore. And that's a big deal, especially when you also can couple that with transportation. So legacy residents and folks have opportunities to take advantage of those things as well. So I'm looking to purchase a home for myself this year. So tired of renting. Yeah, no, I got you. So one thing I would say to you, Jayla, if you're planning on buying a home this year, my mama always used to tell me is to get ready, but stay ready so I don't have to get ready. So I would absolutely recommend that you do your housing counseling. So you can actually go to livebaltimore.com. There's a few different resources that you can leverage in order to take that housing counseling. But housing counseling, you do this class, you get a housing certificate. What that certificate does is it gives you access to tons of grants and resources that Baltimore City has to offer to become a homeowner in the city. Don't let your agent or your lender or anybody tell you that you don't qualify for anything if you get the housing certificate. It doesn't matter. There are grants and incentives that are out there that do not depend on your income. So if you have a higher income level, it doesn't mean you don't qualify for anything. Literally, if you buy a house that has had a vacant building notice for over 12 months prior to being renovated, like assuming that you're buying a flipped house or something like that, you qualify for a $10,000 vacancy value booster grant just because someone like me did a renovation. It's not dependent on your salary or anything like that. You don't have to be, from Baltimore, moving to Baltimore. You just have to be buying a house in Baltimore that used to be vacant. And you can get $10,000 for your down payment and closing cost assistance. But you can't get access to anything without that housing counseling certificate. And it is valid for, I think, 12 or 18 months. They changed it during COVID. So if you're buying a house this year, do that now. Add that to your list of things to do for the year. Love it. Using VA loan for multifamily business and multifamily property in Baltimore. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. All right. So neighborhoods with the biggest decrease in vacant building notices were Broadway East and East Baltimore, Central Park Heights and West Baltimore. The biggest increases in vacant building notices. So the neighborhoods where we saw vacants increase instead of decreasing, where overall the city was seeing a decrease. Most of them were in West Baltimore. And so those neighborhoods were Carlton Ridge, Westport, Brooklyn, and Curtis Bay. Carlton Ridge, Westport, Brooklyn, and Curtis Bay. Now, let me tell y'all the tea. Okay? Westport, Brooklyn, and Curtis Bay. Those three neighborhoods specifically. Does anybody know what those things are near? Those three neighborhoods? Westport, Brooklyn, and Curtis Bay. What are they near? Water. What city y'all know got waterfront property still? They're by the water for sure. What else? There's something else they're near. Oh, there you go. Port Covington. They're by Port Covington. So here's the tea. When there are projects like Port Covington, where I'm sorry, they renamed Port Covington to Baltimore Peninsula, which like I did not sign off on that. Nobody asked me my opinion. It's Port Covington to me. Like your mama named you Port Covington, your name Port Covington. So near Baltimore Peninsula. So that is the area where Under Armour's headquarters is. They built all that up. Now they're having festivals and all this cool stuff going on over there. Which means, anybody remember the term I used to say back in the day when I would do these a little bit more often? FTM. What does FTM stand for? What does FTM stand for? FTM, come on. Come on. I know some of y'all been around me for a while. I know y'all know what it stands for. Follow the money. Follow the money. Okay, let me tell you what they spent for Port Covington and Baltimore Peninsula. Do you know how much you gotta pay to change your entire name that you've been using for however many years to create a project, and you just change the name? You know how much that costs just to rebrand? Follow the money. So when you're following the money, what happens is some of those neighborhoods and areas, when there is that big anchor institution, there's that area that a lot of money is being spent, they are going to want to see the neighborhoods and areas around that to grow and develop to support the growth and prosperity of that project. They know that if they have a ton of people working there, or there's a lot of restaurants, or they have all of these markets and they have all this cool stuff they want people to get to, they would like folks to live by it and be able to come and support those businesses consistently, easily, which means that those areas and those neighborhoods will need to create the opportunity for folks to want to live there if they don't already, right? You obviously already have people who live there. All of that stuff it's literally gentrification, right? They want to raise the standards of those neighborhoods to middle class to support the ability for that project to be successful long term. So if I am the developer there, I'm going to say, hello, city, I need y'all to help me help y'all continue to get this done and do it well. And so they are going to rally the troops, and inspectors are sending out those vacant building notices, right? They're going to pay more attention to make sure that homes that were not previously on the vacant building notice or VBN list join it so that they can push those owners to actually get the work done, sell it, or take it back. All just a cycle. So most of those properties are more about kind of pushing the growth and development of those neighborhoods than I think it's about the condition of the neighborhoods. But what do I know? What do I know? Speaking of following the money, in 2023, we had Harbor Place. So closing out the receivership process of Harbor Place. I know if you read the newspapers, it wouldn't sound like that. But remember, that whole project, all of the harbor, went into pretty much foreclosure, went through the receivership process. and MCB Real Estate and Dave Bramble and team bought Harbor Place. They came out with their plan, which I'm excited about, to be able to redevelop the harbor and kind of reimagine and rebuild this centerpiece of what built tourism in Baltimore City. That project is wildly important to success in the future of the city. And I'm excited that, Dave Bramble's the head of it, honestly. I think he's pretty dope. So you won't get any Dave Bramble slander from here. But I will say that I am interested to see how and what they pivot with their current plan for the project and what it looks like. And I also know and understand how those kind of numbers work. And so it's going to, I think he's going to have to try to find a happy medium. But the goal that they have behind Harbor Place is really, really great. I'm excited about it. Live, work, and play is important. Making it a travel destination, not only locally, but internationally, is important. And the more people that come into Baltimore to play really get an opportunity to see how dope it is to live here, right? The people who work here, which a lot of people travel into Baltimore to work every single day, if they stay to play, then I think there's a better, that much more of an opportunity for them to see how dope it is to live here. There's a bunch of other stuff on this list of cool things. There's a land bank and all this other kind of stuff that they're talking about and working on and coming out with. But we kind of talked about vacants to nauseum. What we didn't talk about in 2023 that I'm still kind of disappointed about, I didn't hear nearly enough about schools for me personally in 2023. So if we are eradicating vacants, we're bringing people into the city, we're redeveloping communities, we're bringing jobs here, we're doing all this stuff. We need to not only attract people on the front end, but we need to keep them here on the back end. And I think schools becomes a really, really big part of that. And I didn't hear nearly enough about schools this year. I think it's important that we tell better stories about our schools. So a lot of people don't know and understand that that Baltimore City has school choice, which means you don't necessarily need to go to the school that's right around the corner from you. You don't hear about the schools that have partnerships with Johns Hopkins or Morgan or these other colleges where kids are getting college credit or they're doing internships and apprenticeships. You're not hearing about, how we constantly have kids from Baltimore City, winning chess tournaments nationally or whatever. We don't hear the positive stories. So I think that there is a marketing opportunity, as maybe corny as that sounds, but it's true about schooling in the city. We have some of the best private schools in the country here, definitely in the state. But even public schools, I don't think that this story is being told fully. And I think sometimes that breeds a lack of hope to really focus on the opportunities that there are as well for improvement, which there obviously are. And so I would really, 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 really like to hear about that in 2024 and not just talk about it, but also hear, I want policy, right? I want to hear how we're funding the schools differently. And there's just a lot of opportunity in the school systems. And so if we don't have those conversations now, I don't just want to hear them during campaign season. I want to talk about them when we're actually doing the work. And not just out here making promises for votes. So I expect to hear the promises for votes in 2024. You don't agree with living at the Inner Harbor. So here's the thing. People are already living at the Inner Harbor. Like, people already live there. Number one, there's tons of luxury apartment buildings all around the harbor. That's first and foremost. The other thing, people are like, well, they're like, well, the buildings are high. Like, you can't see the water at all now. But all the plans, you actually have direct view and pathways to the water. Like, you don't know the water is there now. When you're driving downtown, you don't know it's there. So the way they built it, you actually have these big pathways to the water. You have these glass buildings so you can see it from the street and everywhere. Like, I feel like sometimes, and this is no shade to you, Ayana, but I feel like most of the people that have like big concerns about the Harbor Place plans, probably don't go to the harbor now. Like I actually go to the harbor now. Our office is like a block or two from the harbor. So I'll go and I'll walk there now. Like I feel like people don't go. But yeah, there's apartments and stuff down there now. Maybe not at that exact spot, but they surround the harbor. There's harbor water view apartment buildings all around. And the same reason why I said that we have Westport, Brooklyn, Curtis Bay being targeted for development by sending vacant building notices, because there's this project that wants that consistent support of the neighborhood and community coming and supporting the businesses and restaurants or whatever that's at Port Covington or Baltimore Peninsula. It's the same thing at Harbor Place. So remember, Harbor Place was a thing. It was a thing. It didn't have housing, and it was just the shops and the restaurants, and that's all good and dandy, but it died, right? Essentially, it went into foreclosure. And so what the apartments and things do for Harbor Place is create consistency around business at those restaurants and at those businesses, at those shops and everything else. So if someone lives there, they can constantly patronize to keep those businesses healthy so that they can continue to grow and flow, versus at the Harbor Place over the years where companies died out because there wasn't that level of consistency. So as a developer, I can see and understand why housing is something that they are thinking about and focusing on, because they want to make sure that there's patronage built into the plan. Because why do all this just to fail again, right? They have to reimagine what it looks like to make sure that they're not just doing it for today, but it's something that's really and truly going to last over time. Now, the other side of that is like, okay, well, what's the affordability? Because yes, there's living and there's apartments and other stuff that have waterfront views, but I'm be honest, them thing $4,000, you got a 1 bedroom and half a kitchen, right? So I get the conversation about affordability, especially if there are, tax credits or whatever else, state and city funding that helps support creation of the project. So I do fully anticipate that there will be some level of affordability requirements. Regardless, actually, there was a policy that came out in 2023 that if you have over, I can't remember, number of units, that you have to have affordable housing of at least, I think, 12% of your units have to be affordable. And affordability is defined not by us, but by the state, because the state has a chart that they come out with every year and says what is the average income of this overall area, and then based on the number of people in the house, what they can actually afford. And so as a developer, when we're doing affordability, we have to set the pricing based on that state model. And so there is a policy in Baltimore that was created and enacted in 2023 that there is a affordable housing component of projects that have a certain size, like larger projects in Baltimore. So there will absolutely be affordable housing component to it. But to be honest, I don't blame him for adding housing to these. And who don't want to live in waterfront property? You know what I mean? Like, we all want, like, living waterfront is dope. And it creates the sustainability of the project. So we talked about affordability. What are some many cannot afford harbor? Yeah, right, exactly. So that's why there's the affordability component. But just, yes, I hear you. And the project got to pencil. It got to work. Otherwise, if it was supposed, somebody else had to do it. Somebody got to do it. I'm going to tell you, if anybody was going to do it, it should be someone that is not only from Baltimore and Black and all of those things, but like literally lives around the way where he grew up and is like really, really ingrained in wanting this city to be successful. He has good intentions, and I think he's listening. But the project got to work. So, um, okay. Any thoughts on the midterm rental market in Baltimore? You have long-term rental, you have short-term rental, and long-term rental and midterm rental. So midterm rental, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's when you have leases that are around the 90-day mark, or give or take. You're not doing 12-month leases, you're not doing 3-day leases, you're doing around like the 90-day mark. Baltimore being a healthcare city, lots of hospitals, nurses, traveling nurses, contract work, things like that in Baltimore. Midterm rentals are great. Airbnb, if Airbnb is your strategy and you do Airbnb somewhere like Miami, you're not gonna like Baltimore, unless you have to get a short-term rental license in order to do Airbnb and stuff like that. This is not a free-for-all with Airbnb and like a couple day rentals. We don't really do that. So the new policy with affordable housing wasn't created when Port Covington started. The policy that I just mentioned, which of course I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, was created really around the conversation of Harbor Place. All right, so 2024, we have an election year, which means a lot of people are going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So I fully intend on making sure folks understand what the conversations being had are and why they're important, and how they really, really dive into or impact what is happening on a investor developer level. From the mayor's office to city council is going to probably get a little bit crazy when it comes to campaigns and elections. So we definitely want to pay attention to that. I think the big conversations are going to be around vacant property and housing, and crime rate, because the crime rate in Baltimore, at least murder specifically, are down 20% in 2023, which is great. But again, like I said before, if y'all ain't talking about these schools and these kids, like, I really think we're missing the boat. So I fully expect and intend to hear more about that. The other conversation, I don't know. Let me just say it before I tell you what I think about it. One of the strategies in 2024 that they'll be talking about is pushing technology forward when it comes to housing. And so there's this whole initiative that's being funded around using blockchain for vacant properties. And the whole blockchain system, which basically means that the city, all things going correctly, will have better tracking of ownership of properties, because they use blockchain to track essentially like the title and things like that. So they're working on that. I may talk about that a little bit, or at least specifically later this week on Instagram. But they're using blockchain technology, which I think is cool to be forward thinking around creating technology. But part of me feels like somebody missing, somebody don't understand. Somebody don't understand something somewhere. I know it's cool, it's a great thought. I'm not saying no, because we have to move into the future, but I need us to clean up the present. That type of stuff is crap in, crap out. And so if the data today isn't good, then the data you put in the blockchain ain't good, which means the data that continues to be tracked through blockchain ain't good. And that means we spend money on something ain't good. That's called a bad investment. But yes, they are thinking outside the box, and I give a star to that, right? I do. I give a star for that. But like, it ain't given for me personally. And I know I don't typically share my opinion, but I feel like it's a buzz conversation. And I'm not saying no. I'm saying I want to make sure that the conversations that are being had are with people who actually do the work. And this is something that I see the problems firsthand and have to navigate them themselves and figure it out themselves and work with people in housing and like see the issues that they're trying to solve themselves. Because I think what happens is we think policy. We're thinking outside the box. Oh, I took this class this one time. I heard this thing. I know this person that does this stuff. And they sit down at a table at a closed door and say, we're going to do this thing. Without the context, and not in theory, but in practice of what the problem is, sometimes we get into situations where we are creating solutions for the wrong problem. And that's my thing, is like, could we be spending this time and energy understanding the problem better so that we're positioned to use something like blockchain that may be adopted fully in a lot of different places, or, could be a cool concept. Clone actually talk to folks about, blockchain and all these things around houses, and what does it mean if when we sell a house, we're also, giving the buyer an NFT, and how cool would that be when that was like the cool thing to do. And so I say this as someone that's like kind of looked into it, maybe not in that context, but in general. And like, I see what they're trying to do, but I also understand the practice of what's happening. And until that conversation happens at, and maybe it has too, because like in my head, if you ain't talk to me, you ain't talk to nobody. I don't know. So ain't nobody talk to me. So until somebody talks to me, or somebody, you know what I mean, someone tells me that I know does the work, that somebody asked them some questions, I'm gonna side eye. I don't know. I'll apologize when I'm wrong. That's why it's important to have people on the ground know the immediate and future issues, like China City Buyers and Tribe, for sure. You already know the vibes. So yeah, crap in, crap out with the blockchain, but it is thinking outside the box. It's trying to push Baltimore forward, it's trying to do all those things, but they could have spent that $250,000 to file some of the the title work or whatever that hasn't been processed yet, sitting on somebody's desk. But anyway, 2024 interest rates should be coming back down. So with interest rates going up, what that did for the market in Baltimore, we saw when interest rates were low and it was like this big boom, everyone to buy and move here, they were moving into areas that historically hadn't seen buyers that way, right? Like, people were willing to push the envelope a little bit on what block and what neighborhood they were on, because there were so many other projects that were coming, and everyone was looking to ride the wave of development, of growth, of property values, all those big things. But when interest rates started rising, it's like, well, hold up, where my money going, right? I'm paying, instead of $1,500 for a $200,000 house, I'm paying $1,500 for a $130 house. Like, what is going on? And so people are being a little bit more tight with where they wanted to buy when interest rates went up. And so you weren't seeing as many houses being sold in like those adjacent neighborhoods, the neighborhoods next to the ones that people really, really wanted to be at, right? And so with interest rates coming back down, I think some of those neighborhoods that saw some momentum that slowed up will start to see those looks again, and have people that are looking to buy that are thinking not only about today, but thinking about tomorrow, thinking about building wealth and equity and the future of these neighborhoods. So I'm excited about that, because there are a lot of like grants and funding sources that weren't around in the past, that's going to spur development in a lot of the neighborhoods that don't typically see that type of investment. And so with interest rates coming down and development starting to increase because of funding and resources coming from the city and the state, we may hopefully see some balance there. So yeah, so I'm excited about the interest rates coming back down. At least that is the conversation. Let me actually do this. I almost forgot. In a few months, actually in a few weeks, we'll be announcing our next conference, the dates, and releasing tickets. And so what I want you guys to do, those of you who are on here right now, I want to make sure that you are on our initial alert list. So we're going to have early access to tickets that people who fill out this form, I'm going to drop it in the chat. Do that, because you don't want to miss out on that, because what we'll be doing there is talking specifically about neighborhoods, talking specifically about doing renovations, buying property, moving into Baltimore, the whole 9 yards. And so make sure you fill out that form if you've never been to Mobilize Baltimore, or you've never did a Charm City bus tour, or you have, you already know you need to be there. But if you haven't, that's a really great way to spend the weekend with us for Mobilize Baltimore. And it'll be in the spring. So wanted to do that. It's also in the description for the video as well. But yeah, so there's a lot that's happened. There's a lot that's happened. There's a lot that's coming. Even West Baltimore, I didn't even mention like WNADA, the West North Avenue Development Authority, and how Senator Hayes really pushed the creation of that organization, that state entity that is really owning the redevelopment of the West North Avenue corridor, and the funding that's coming with and through that. They got $11 million for their first year. The way they are disseminating those funds and kind of doing all that stuff is unique, but will still, I think, make a big difference on that West and North Avenue area. So more to come with them in 2024. The land bank. So the land bank essentially is it's the same but different as what Build, Mayor Brandon Scott, and the Greater Baltimore Committee is doing with the $3 billion for this special purpose entity that will essentially get control of properties and get it in the hands of developers. The land bank is like kind of the same thing, but with a different entity. So the land bank can raise money and get bonds and things like that. But what they want to do is create this organization essentially that can get control of properties, work with the city kind of as a quasi-government agency, or an organization aligned with the city where they can get control of properties and get it in the hands of investors and developers. What both the land bank and Build are trying to do are essentially at the core of it the same thing. I was more involved on the Build side. I'm familiar and know, the people who are working on the land bank side, which is cool. My thing is, as long as we all trying to get the stuff done, right, and not just kind of talking about it, but being about it, how do we get it all over the finish line and actually accomplish the goals? I don't care what you call it, right? Just tell me where to get the houses. You know what I mean? Just, okay, cool, right? Do you know what you're doing? Do you understand, not just the theory of what you're trying to accomplish, but the practice with people who have been doing the work and have been on the street and managing the projects and buying the houses and having the conversations, right? Are the right people at the table to help shape what you're doing, how you're doing it. And then tell me where the houses are. I'll come get some. Or, 1,000 people that have been through Next Gen, come get some, and we can go ahead and get all this work done. I don't care about what you call it. But the land bank and what Build is doing, essentially, at its core, is relatively the same. It's more so language, and potentially how the properties are disseminated. But the big thing is there's a lot of vacants. Only so many of them are being counted, because you're only counted if you have a vacant building notice. And we need a better, faster, smarter way to get control of these vacant properties. And so the land bank and this Build special purpose entity, they can get access to funding outside of, in addition to the city, to be able to acquire more properties faster without the bureaucracy and staffing or whatever that the city has, and not distract the city housing department from doing the other work that they need to be doing, like permitting and inspections and giving the vacant building notices in the first place. And then these entities can focus on getting the vacant properties into the hands of the right people. That's it. If anybody, honestly, and this is no shade, if anybody explains it any differently than that, then they're just making it more complicated than it needs to be. At the end of the day, both organizations want to make sure vacant houses are getting out of the hands of people who are sitting on them and into the hands of people who are going to get them done. Cool. Dope. What else? Let me go through the chat. You're welcome. East Baltimore Midway. That neighborhood's block to block. Just make sure that you understand what block you own. That's the key to most neighborhoods, to be honest. So much grant money is specific to the neighborhood. Also, I'm buying in Ashburton and can't get the $7,500 from Go Northwest because I went under contract without home buyer workshop from Go Northwest. Yeah, there are a few neighborhoods that are like that, and even a few blocks that you would get access to certain things if you went through a certain organization. That's why, honestly, who your agent is really helpful. Sometimes it's hard to know. Sometimes it's hard to know which direction to go when it comes to who to work with, but it is good to know if you do know where you're buying to be able to work with an organization that is either based in or focused on that area and neighborhood is always going to be a good idea. But yeah, that sucks. I hate that happening. But I would look into either your lender. Sometimes lenders will match or they have their own grants and incentives and things. Make sure that there aren't any other things that you qualify for that could offset or replace that $7,500. But yeah, a lot of times or sometimes you'll find that those organizations have special funding for the area that they specifically are targeting. Bus tours only on Saturdays. For the most part, they are on Saturdays, but when we do Mobilize Baltimore this year, the bus tour will actually be on Sunday. And the conference will have panels and stuff on that Saturday. But yeah, they're typically on a Saturday. Sorry, I'm just making sure I didn't miss questions. Cool. Turn up. Let's go. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm excited about 2024. We'll be doing and hosting our own groundbreaking in the spring. We'll be sharing more information about some of the projects that we have going on and working on. So a lot of times we are supporting our Next Gen Accelerator students and our mentees who are buying up everything. Like I said before, they did about literally $5,668,500 in investment in Baltimore in 2023 when interest rates were up and construction was up and everything else. Buying, for those who are flipping, buyers, there were less buyers, a lot more competition. They still invested over $5.5 million in Baltimore City. And so, looking at 2024, I'm excited for them and what they're going to do and accomplish. I'm excited to be able to, after in 2023, not really not intentionally, but pushing it, like really talking about Next Gen and talking about what we're doing and what they're accomplishing and highlighting a lot of their successes. With interest rates coming back down and things shifting and a lot of money flowing into the city, we'll be talking about Next Gen and the coaching program, the mentorship, a lot more specifically this year. Again, for those of you who are interested and want to kind of learn more about what Next Gen is all about, here is the link for that. I'm going to drop that in the chat. That is where really we have conversations like this probably on a weekly basis, to be honest, or when I do my sessions, which were weekly, but we have a lot of other folks who are doing sessions on a day-to-day basis where I'm bringing in agents and lenders and CPAs and contractors and all these folks to be able to make sure that everyone has access to not just me, but the resources, the team members, all of those things that they need to be able to make that level of investment in the city. So I'm excited about 2024 for them. I don't know how to make it clickable. Copy paste, maybe. I don't know. I don't be on YouTube enough. My bad. um, but uh, but yeah, so I'm excited for them. I'm excited to make some more announcements about what we have going on. Been doing some really great work, not only in the city but in partnership with even the state and the housing departments on both levels, and helping to support and guide the initiatives that folks have to help make sure that not only are we successful, but the city is successful, right? Like there is a way to build wealth and build real estate, right? There is a way to add value to yourself and your own next generation while also adding value in the community we're investing. And I think for me, the way to do that is through not only educating ourselves and making sure that we're positioned to not just buy a house, but actually turn it into a home, and one that is of good quality, and it's affordable and all those types of things, but also educating each other so that we are just aware of what's going on. Like I used to say, before I started to like post on Instagram about the different articles and news and what's happening, I always said like the information is in the newspaper. Like if you can do nothing else, read the newspaper. And I realized nobody was going to read it, so I might as well do a 30-second reel because that's the length of our attention span, just to make sure there's some level of awareness of what's happening, because it's important. It informs how we make decisions. It informs how we move even as residents, right? To know what's happening around us. A lot of times the negative impacts of gentrification come down to a lack of awareness, intentionally or unintentionally. And so if it's going to be hidden in a newspaper somewhere, we might as well have a conversation about it. And so one of my goals for this year is to do more of these sessions. I want to get this page to 10,000 subscribers. We have a little, maybe about 3,000 subscribers away. At that point, I will be launching my podcast. So we will have a podcast here, or YouTube show or wherever, where not only will we be having conversations, but also bringing in guests. So whether that's other developers, politicians, investors, next gen folks. So y'all on next gen know if you get tapped on, make sure you show up. But talk about not only what I'm seeing and what we're doing, but what they're seeing and what they're doing and what their goals are, and how they're contributing to the overall success of Baltimore and Charm City. So I'm excited about that. I need y'all's help to hit that goal. So make sure that you're hitting the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure that you're sharing the information so that we can continue to grow in conversation and grow in awareness and grow in opportunity, and make sure that folks know and understand that Baltimore is about a whole lot more than The Wire, about vacant properties, about what you see on TV, but it's truly about charm and culture, and really the strength and resilience of its people. And I'm excited about that. So 2024 is going to be dope. The goal is Fridays that we're meeting here and chatting about what's happening, what's going on for the week. And next gen, y'all already know the vibes. There's so much coming and in store for next gen. We actually, over the last several years, we've had a few different VIP kind of higher level groups where we're talking about larger scale developments and having more one-on-one time and small group time and in-person coaching and mentorship and things like that. And at the end of last year, we were recommended by Baltimore City Housing to have Bloomberg Philanthropy and BDC, the Baltimore Development Corporation, sponsor a group in our small developer program, knowing and understanding that we've been doing the work, we've been teaching the people, we've been creating this next wave of investors and developers in Baltimore City. And so BDC sponsored a group to go through our Charm City by our Small Developers program. So we'll be sharing more about what they have going on over the next few months as we have that group. And hopefully they decide to sponsor again, and we can go ahead and continue that practice of having folks in that group and that program to help make sure that folks know and understand not only how to invest, but how to develop, how to think like a developer, how to move like a developer, how to negotiate like a developer, and how to truly transform communities in a positive way, where we're not only thinking about the bottom line, but thinking about how we are impacting the community in a really positive way. So I'm excited about all of that. I will be hosting a session next week, webinar style, called Keeping the Charm in Charm City, where we're going to focus on how do you invest with an impact, right? And how you make sure your ROI isn't just about your return on investment, but what your return on impact is going to be. So that will be on Thursday live. So be free to join. Replays will have a separate cost, but you can join for free. So you can see the link for that in the description as well. So hopefully I'll see you guys there next Thursday. Again, make sure that you check out Next Gen if you haven't already. We have the mailing list for Mobilize Baltimore to get your tickets early. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Follow the Instagram because y'all know that's where I be playing around. If you're going to follow us on Twitter, don't judge me. I'm trying to get out of my ranting style over there and take that somewhere else. But it's going to be a great year. I think, interest rates coming down, investment as far as money coming from the city and the state, and not just for those who are kind of, old school, been here, been doing it forever, get access to, but smaller developers, people who are newer to development investing also get access to those funds and opportunities as well, which is different and new. And so that I think is going to make a big impact in 2024. So stay ready so you don't got to get ready. So stay tapped in, join Next Gen, be part of the conversation, join the webinar next week live if you can. If you're catching a replay, you missed it, you can get access to the replay as a course, as a class in itself. But it's time to buckle down for yourself, buckle down for your future. Let's get ready for 2024, y'all. Awesome. Okay, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day. Share, subscribe, like. Talk to you soon. Bye.